Just a few years back, nobody, not even black people, was ready to accept that slavery reparations would ever be paid. It just seemed too good to be true. But recently, states and cities have been working closely with black communities to pay the overdue reparations finally. We saw California establishing a task force about that, with a Chicago suburb even sending payments to some black people in their accounts. However, no state ever decided on a significantly bigger sum for reparations until San Francisco started its reparation program. That does not mean it's paying a huge amount enough to compensate for the brutalities of slavery, but it's comparatively larger than what other states have decided to pay. The city's African American Reparations Advisory Committee has decided to pay $5 million to every black American. Now, the city's local government is planning when to pay the reparation and whether the sum should be cut or increased. But who qualifies for the reparation payment? Let's know the details in this video.
The Black History Archas.
Tasked with determining how to compensate black residents of San Francisco for years of discrimination, a government-appointed panel took an unconventional approach. Instead of solely relying on numerical calculations, the 15-member group spent time tracing the city's historical relation with slavery and discrimination practices after the ban on slavery. You should note that back in the 1960s, city officials tore down sections of the Fillmore District, once celebrated as the Harlem of the West, displacing 883 businesses and 20,000 residents, predominantly black. Even though slavery had ended, black people were still facing systemic racism. Therefore, not only did they deserve slavery reparation, but what they endured even after that. Fast forward to today, and many black people remain displaced, witnessing the neighborhood's transformation into a predominantly white area dotted with million-dollar properties. To address this and other instances of racial injustice, San Francisco's African American Reparations Advisory Committee recently proposed that eligible black residents should receive $5 million each in reparations. But who will be eligible? We will come to that within a few minutes. Eric McDonald, the committee's chair and leader of San Francisco-based consulting firm Peacock Partnerships, clarified that no rigid mathematical formula was involved. Instead, the focus was on identifying a substantial investment capable of assisting families in rebuilding their lives after enduring the aftermath of slavery and its long-lasting consequences. To some extent, that's a valid argument. It's because it's nearly impossible to set a monetary equivalent of the brutalities and hardships slaves endured during slavery. Therefore, setting a figure that can allow black Americans to keep pace with their white counterparts living in nearby neighborhoods, San Francisco has decided to pay $5 million per black American. It should be noted that the proposed reparations program isn't intended to compensate for slavery. It's because many believe that slavery was never legally practiced in San Francisco. Pay attention to the word legally because it means illegally. Slavery existed, and San Francisco was no different than other areas of the United States. The proposed reparation is being considered to address the harm inflicted by public policies that perpetuated racial subjugation, echoing the intentions and repercussions of slavery. San Francisco's action reflects a wider trend nationwide, with numerous cities and states exploring reparations programs. These initiatives seek to quantify the financial impact of slavery and the enduring consequences of Jim Crow laws. Proposed measures range from educational scholarships and housing assistance to direct cash payments for black Americans. However, if direct payment is to be made, the question remains, how much should be paid? Well, determining a monetary figure that satisfies reparations proponents while also being politically palatable to the significant number of Americans who oppose financial compensation for black Americans could determine the future of reparation. It's unfortunate that one has to consider pleasing those who oppose reparation while setting a price. However, that's a reality. The white supremacists who oppose reparations payments want to give black people peanuts in the name of reparations. They are more inclined toward the idea that reparation money should be used in creating welfare services for the black community. However, one cannot stay without questioning why black people have to sacrifice their reparation money for services that white people get free of cost. Due to white supremacist biases, San Francisco's proposal of $5 million considerably higher than amounts discussed in other locales, has faced vigorous criticism from conservatives who argue it is financially unfeasible for a city with an annual budget of $14 billion. The proposal does not specify who would qualify. Still, if even a fraction of the city's 50,000 Black residents met the criteria, it would consume a substantial portion of its yearly budget. John Dennis, chairman of the San Francisco Republican Party, expressed willingness to discuss whether Black residents should receive reparations, but portrayed the proposal as lacking seriousness. He said this was simply a group of like-minded individuals who gathered and arrived at a number. According to William A. Darity Jr., no widely accepted formulas exist for determining reparations, but the figure should be somewhat realistic. He said that proposing a $5 million payout by a local government undermines the credibility of the reparations effort. However, supporters of the proposal argue that it is justified, highlighting that the city's Black residents have a median income of about $44,000 compared to $85,000 for Latinos, $105,000 for Asians, and $113,000 for white residents, according to 2021 census data. Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you by subscribing to our channel and giving the video a like. We want to build a strong community and we need your support. Let's continue now. Cheryl Evans Davis, the executive director of the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, stressed the significance of acknowledging the city's history of racist policies, including housing and school segregation. When discussing reparations, she noted that San Francisco also grapples with one of the country's highest living costs, with a median home price of $1.3 million. The outcome of this debate in San Francisco could carry substantial implications for the national reparations movement, potentially setting a precedent for initiatives that critics argue have provided relatively modest sums. In Evanston, a Chicago suburb renowned for hosting America's inaugural government-funded reparations program, the city is extending a $25,000 housing voucher to some Black residents, a figure scrutinized by some as insufficient. But there is something phenomenal about it. Black people have started receiving reparation, rejecting the biased view that reparations are impractical. Now the next debate should be focused on deciding on a sufficient sum. Meanwhile, Providence, Rhode Island, has unveiled a $10 million reparations program, but it does not entail direct cash payments to Black residents, and even white residents are eligible to apply. Economist Darity contends that Black Americans should receive a minimum of $350,000 each in a federal reparations program, based on his examination of the country's racial wealth gap. He perceives this gap as a pivotal indicator of the enduring effects of white racism and supremacy on contemporary Black Americans whose forebears were enslaved. California has established a distinct state reparations task force, which has enlisted a team of 5 economists to assess the cost of discrimination encountered by the state's Black population. The team computed California's maximum liability for discriminatory housing policies spanning from 1933 to 1977, resulting in a figure of $569 billion. This equates to $223,239 for every Black California resident. Casey Campbell, one of the economists advising California's reparations task force, underscored the absence of a one-size-fits-all approach to reparations. Perspectives on reparations can vary significantly based on factors such as legislative feasibility, the perceived severity of injustices, and the lasting impact of slavery. Japanese Americans who survived internment camps during World War II faced similar challenges when they began pushing for reparations in the 1970s. Donald K. Tamaki, a lawyer involved in the Supreme Court case that paved the way for reparations for Japanese Americans, explained that there was tension over the best approach to adequately compensate for the harm inflicted on the Japanese community and finding a figure that would garner enough political support. Tamaki pointed out that compensating thousands of victims for years of imprisonment, the loss of businesses and homes, and the lives lost in the camps would have amounted to billions of dollars. Ultimately, in 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed legislation to provide $20,000 in reparations payments to over 80,000 Japanese Americans. Tamaki described this figure as affordable and politically acceptable, but not based on the economic assessment of the harm endured by their community. However, Tamaki clarified that these negotiations do not serve as a fair model for reparations for Black Americans. He highlighted the vast disparity between 4 years in a concentration camp and centuries of enslavement, followed by years of racial terror and exclusion. However, the debate surrounding reparations has sparked controversy among local leaders in San Francisco, a liberal city where 85% of voters supported President Biden. Since the release of the draft report in December, the Reparations Committee has been inundated with hate mail, including explicit and racist messages via email and voicemail. Shaman Walton, the board member who authored the legislation establishing the reparations panel, expressed concern in a recent Facebook post about threatening messages received by his office staff, including interns, who fear for their safety. One of the challenges discussed in San Francisco is determining eligibility criteria for recipients. Roughly 50,000 Black individuals live in San Francisco, although the precise number of eligible individuals is not certain. According to the proposed plan, eligibility requirements entail being at least 18 years old and having self-identified as Black or African American in public records for at least 10 years. Therefore, if you live in San Francisco and are above 18, you are eligible to receive reparations. However, a question remains: when will this proposed reparation be paid? Well, the answer lies in San Francisco's time taken to allocate a fund from which reparations could be paid. This might seem like a dream never coming true, but as the sum has been decided, the source from which this amount will be paid will also be decided. The idea lies in proposing that the city's government consider various sources instead of the city's budget. The city's budget can never support the heavy burden of reparation, and it can be used as an excuse to never pay reparations. One proposal is to impose taxes on the affluent to finance reparations. If the goal is to diminish the racial wealth gap, this could entail redistributing resources from the extremely wealthy to those encountering significant barriers in amassing wealth. There are various approaches to taxing wealth, including elevating rates on capital gains or estate taxes, instituting taxes on unrealized capital gains, or introducing a wealth tax, or properties and wealth of the direct descendants of slave owners could be taxed heavily, if not seized. One thing has to be ensured while paying reparations: recipients would not be subject to taxes on reparations, although they would be taxed on any income derived from investing the payments. But how helpful reparation money can be for Black Americans? Well, reports suggest that a one-time reparations payment of only $66,000 grows the net wealth of Black Americans by 160%. This seems a good percentage. And since San Francisco is planning to pay $5 million, Black people can buy properties and invest the remaining amount, keeping pace with their white counterparts. What do you think? Should the city's African American committee have decided on a bigger sum than $5 million? Or do you think $5 million is a sufficient amount for reparations? In the comments section right below, let us know whether you support the idea of reparation payment or if you believe it should be given in the form of better housing, education, and other services. Would you like us to make more videos? If yes, please support us by subscribing to the Black History Archives and clicking the bell icon. You can check out more videos on our channel too.